Right, good evening. Battle for Azeroth is now out, so there's no such thing as spoilers anymore as far as I'm concerned. Because everything I can know, everyone else can possibly know, except there's only been like 20 hours to find it out, but never mind. I am still technically in game at the moment. I'm trying to buy some ore. I'm amazed at how cheap all the crafted stuff is. I got on last night. Anyone who watched me stream sort of saw for a bit, to try and quickly net some profit from the experience gems. Hiya, Gareth. And only one sold because the price now is bargain basement. Everyone's onto them. And I thought to myself, well, that's probably because you can craft those gems. Because apart from anything else, I waste. So what I did last night is I did the scenario on... what did I do it on first? Oh, the Paladin, that's right, yeah. Yeah, that was the plan. Do it on the Paladin, best gear, blow through it. And then on my Druid and Hunter, I'd be able to skip the scenario. No, I had to do those as well. And I did it on my Druid, and I must have spent quite a long time on my Druid just to get like 10 ore to prospect. And I got the gem I wanted, it was all right. But then when I actually came to look at the auction house, the price of ore is not very expensive. You know, traditionally at the start of an expedition, well, certainly at the start of Legion, it was actually quite expensive. But it's not. The launch pretty messy. It was from certain people's point of view. Draenor on the EU side, I think it's still got problems, hasn't it? You know, that basic wasn't on. That's a big realm. That is a big realm. So it depends on your point of view. For some people's point of view, there was no problem with it at all. What they did, because obviously they anticipated a massive amount, it makes me wonder, because Legion was so smooth, it makes me wonder if there are far more people playing the launch of BFA than played the launch of Legion. I have to be honest. I don't know. But, yeah, so they took communities off and guilds off and stuff like that. Basic and voice chat. So they took a lot of things offline that are not super essential, just to try and make it as smooth as possible. I think for most people it probably was, but obviously it wasn't for everyone. I mean, about 3 hours in, I started getting hit with problems, and then eventually I called it and went to bed. But didn't get any sleep. Eventually, it was getting to like 20 past 5, and I thought to myself, right, at this point, even if I fall asleep now, I'm going to be getting up at stupid o'clock later on. So I just got up and started playing again. And then I went to bed for a few hours at midday. So I don't know what's happened to my body clock now. I'm going to try going to bed at round about. Maybe I'll try going at 1 o'clock in the morning or something and see if I can get to sleep. Because, you know, so we'll have to see how that goes. But it's mostly been okay for me. As I say, it wasn't 3 hours in, it wasn't. And I don't know what it was like for the rest of it. So Wormrest Accord US was iffy. Yeah, it was the fluctuation in frame, but then I was getting disconnected. In fact, I wasn't just getting disconnected from the game. Battle.net itself was getting disconnected and wouldn't reconnect. I mean, when it first happened, that's usually an indicator that my internet's gone down, that I need to reset the router. But I still seem to be online. I asked in the chat, am I online? Yes. So it was purely Battle.net having issues. And then it did it again a bit later, so I thought, oh, sod it. So, yeah, not as smooth as Legion. Although I'm not saying Legion was brilliant for everyone as well, but I think there were more people affected this time around, which is interesting. It is interesting because it means one of two things. Either BFA was putting technically more load onto the servers than Legion did, just as in terms of what the expansion involves. The thing is, though, and I was saying this in the stream last night, I don't understand Blizzard. Why do they, like, from the Horde point of view, I know what it's like from Horde and Alliance because I've done it on the beta, of course, but take the Horde point of view, because most people are Horde, let's face it now. If I'm Horde, that means most people are Horde. So from Horde's point of view, you have to... What happens? Shit, I can't remember. So you go onto the ramparts, you talk to Nathanos, he sends you to Gromosh Hold, you talk to Sylvanas, then you come out of there and you go into a little hut near Gromosh Hold, and then you go back onto the ramparts. That's 4 places you go to in a small area in Orgrimmar where everyone has to do it. Why on earth do they have a launch that doesn't just put you straight into the scenario? I don't get it. I do not get it. Why they would have you. And not just going to one point, like where you had to go to Magni at the very start. That actually turned out okay. In fact, I was expecting to have to do like I did at the start of Legion with Khadgar. You couldn't click on him, so I had to target him and use the keybind for interact with target. You know. Would that have been a side effect of doing a global simultaneous launch? But they did that with Legion, didn't? Or did they do it with Legion? They did, because it came out from my point of view the day before, because it came out late at night as well. So the launch was like that for Legion as well, wasn't it? You're pretty sure they were getting DDoS? I don't know, because some of the issues... I mean, let's face it, the thing is, I don't know the details, but put it this way. Blizzard were deliberately taking certain systems offline that were considered non-essential just to make the launch smoother. Now imagine this. Imagine while they were doing that, they knocked something else out by mistake. Because I don't know whether anyone noticed, but Real ID got taken offline last night as well. I don't think that was intended. So I think maybe some wrong buttons were pressed in the heat of the moment, in the stress of the moment. I think actually, you know, I think things went wrong, to be honest. But it wasn't an awful... I mean, if you compare it to Warlords of Draenor 4 years ago, it wasn't on that scale, at least. You know, so... And I think most people aren't going to stay up all night anyway. I know there's a significant number who do, and most don't. So for most people, it's a launch. Launches traditionally are a bit iffy in a popular game anyway. Hi, Kevin. Legion wasn't global. What happened with Legion then? Because in Legion, it came out... It was like the launch date was the Tuesday, but it came out on the Monday. So I was able to play it for a few hours before I had to go to bed to go to work the next day. So they brought it out at a strange time in Europe then. Oh, we got it before NA, did we? I didn't remember that then. All right, okay. Even so, I still don't see why it would... The only way I can see it as being an issue with a globally simultaneous launch is because they've only got so many engineers, I guess, so you're splitting them into... Because obviously the EU and the NA are completely separate beasts. And I mean literally separate, because I have an NA account linked to the same Battle.net as 2 EU accounts, but there's no link between them. I don't, for example, get any shared achievement. Like my 2 EU accounts get everything shared. It's as if it's the same account, but my NA gets nothing. So it might just be that, you know, you're splitting the available number of engineers to solve problems in half, maybe. I don't know. But what I do suspect is that in amongst their taking things offline that they meant to, I think they took some things offline that they didn't mean to, and I think that caused problems. So I don't think it went super according to plan. But at the same time, I'm not going to beat them up about it. I think, you know. Obviously, if any individual that was badly affected by it, for example, someone who took the day off work so that they could play through the night and then couldn't play through the night, obviously that's, you know, that's harsh. Because, I mean, if someone had done that in Legion, hi Fraser, if someone had done that in Legion, I'd have said, you silly beggar, because look what happened in WoD. But given that Legion went quite well, I think it was reasonable. I was certainly confident that it was going to go well for this one as well. Authentication servers. Oh no. Anyway, I suppose at some point Blizzard will say what the issue was. Hopefully they'll be able to say that it actually didn't affect most people and it'll all be okay. I mean, there were certainly people getting to 120 within a few hours. It is actually quite rapid because I've leveled characters up on the beta at various points and the speed at which you level has varied a bit as well. Obviously, if you're leveling up with war mode, as I am, you know, and you've got the gem, that's plus 15% experience as well. You've got to bear that in mind. Another thing I've noticed, I don't know if this is the same for everyone else, because I've only tried queuing up as a DPS. I've not been able to get into a dungeon. I've been in queues for like over an hour and then decided to sod it for a dungeon. I've never known that. Usually you can get into, or I've been able to get into dungeons really quickly, like queuing for normal dungeons while I level. No problem at all. Can't get into one. I'm not 120 yet, no, I'm 117. I had, as I say, I wasted time on my druid, which I now wish I hadn't have done. Instant queue for tanks. But DPS, it's a nightmare then. Maybe I should have signed up as a tank. But I tried earlier this morning, earlier this morning, like 10 o'clock or something in the morning. I tried queuing up, it was over an hour. Then at a more reasonable time, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I tried again. I was on for like an hour, and then I wanted to go down and make myself something to eat. And then I had some models to spray paint, so I haven't been on since. And the other thing is, there's only certain times of the day, like the only times I wanted to be in the queue, because I had several deliveries due today. So I've had packages arriving. And so obviously I didn't want to be in a dungeon when they'd arrive. So that's why I went for morning, where I knew it wouldn't arrive in the morning or after they'd all arrived. But anyway. But yeah, so I'm super surprised at how cheap all the professional stuff is. Because even contracts, like the experience gems, I suppose makes sense. I managed to sell one for like 11,000, 12,000, something like that last night, which made all my money back. My hunter is in profit compared to the ore he bought. I've got a load of gems that I can't sell, but it doesn't matter. The epic gem will sell, but later on. I suppose I have to wait for people to get the patterns to be able to use the epic gems, and then I suspect that'll go for more. But I mean, it's but the experience gem is a piece of piss to craft. You can imagine a load of people going dual craft miner just so they could make and put them in the auction house, because there's now pages of them, at least on Taran Mill, pages of them. It's ridiculous. But the contracts, I thought, you've actually got to get quite a high. You've got to level your inscription to be able to make the contract. So I thought, well, they might be still quite expensive. But even the Champions of Azeroth one, which is the good one to get, is only like 6,000. I bought one for each of my 3 characters for 6,000 gold. Learning dungeons as a tank is not fun. No. I mean, that's the thing. Your tank is I don't mind tanking dungeons, but I'd prefer. That's why because I almost thought about, well, what if I just signed up as tank? But I couldn't really be asked. I've done some of the dungeons, but it's actually quite a long time since I've done any of the dungeons, even on the beta. I expect it to also be the leader that goes through a certain route. It's very difficult if you've got to try and, without voice comms, ask where to go and things like that. So certainly, I mean, that's one reason, because I don't mind tanking dungeons, really. I prefer not tanking at all. I mean, some of the dungeons I've done enough that I would remember my way around, and some of them not so much. And the mythic only one I haven't done at all. Siege of Borealis, I think it is. So, but anyway, yeah. But it's been all right. The leveling has been okay. I've got 3 more levels to do, which I'll do tomorrow. I'm not going to necessarily do those tonight. I'm not in any hurry. I've got to ease myself into the casual scrub mode. In fact, if I level to get dinged tomorrow, that will be still by far the quickest I'll have ever leveled a character. Assuming I do it more in the morning, because it's only taken, even me, I'm not doing it at anything like a pace. I'm just questing. And I'm watching the cinematics and stuff like that, at least the first time. It's only taking like an hour. It's at the moment taking a bit over an hour, because it's slowed down a little bit. It didn't slow down much for me when I lost the legendary effects, because I didn't take strength legendary effects. I took ones for speed, so I've just been literally slowed down. How's the overall questing experience? Well, it's like I've done it quite a few times, so I sort of knowing what order I wanted to do it. Is the story better than I thought it would be? Well, I knew that the story was. There isn't much. Even the cinematics that weren't shown in the beta haven't really added anything that I've seen yet. So I haven't learnt anything story-wise that I didn't already know. There will be some. At some point I will. Hi, Aaron. You've been trying to decide on your main for a bit. Oh, you're right now. Well done. Oh, hi, lazy man. So what I did is I chose to do Vol'dun first for two reasons. First of all, there are certain areas where it's densely packed mobs, and it's just easier to do those when you're in your best geared. You can just mince through everything. Which also reminds me, another thing that's really cheap profession-wise is the crafted gear that you can use at 111. I've just been buying some on my Hunter. In fact, that reminds me, the bloody Hunter's still online. Shit. I've gone AFK now. I've got to do that search again. So I've just been buying up some gear for it. So all that time I spent on my Druid and Hunter trying to do those world quests to try and get a bit of gear, pointless. Because you can just buy some 233 gear for like 2,000 gold each. Apart from the rings, because that's what I'm searching for the ore for. The rings are all hideously expensive. So I thought, well, I'm a jewel crafter, I'll just make my own. But I hope everyone is remembering, by the way, if you're not an enchanter, not to vend your gear. Like, you can vend your Legion gear, obviously, nothing to do with that. But any quest gear or stuff that you don't want, obviously, I hope everyone's remembering to use the scrap bot for that. If they've found the scrap... I suppose if you've not known much about it and you've not bothered with your professions, you might not even know about the scrap bot. But that's quite good because, you know, it previously was the case that only enchanters had any use for old gear. Well, now everyone can do something with it. So yeah, I should be able to get my Druid and my Hunter in reasonable gear now. So that'll help. When I eventually get to properly leveling those, that should help quite a bit. Although I've been having an easier job of it on my Druid so far. I've even managed to craft a polearm for my Druid, actually, as a blacksmith. Because it surprised me how cheap just all the crafting stuff is. That I've seen anyway, that I've looked up. Different matter for the 350 BOEs. I saw Sol Sakura was saying he's picked up a really good sword for 500,000 gold. Whereas I looked on as soon as he said it, I thought, oh, I should check on the auction house. Checked on the auction house. The cheapest one on mine was 1.5 million gold, and it went right up to 6 million gold for one piece. And I'm thinking, oh shit. I already, because I could only transfer 1 million gold, so I'm already like potless. And the priority is stuff for professions, so that I can build up stuff for professions. Because then I'll at least be able to craft myself some 2 epic pieces, you know, legs and belt. And then that'll work for that. What? Oh, it's reset the interface. I see what's happened there. What honor talents? What did I go for? I went for the 2 judgment ones. And I went for the Blessing of Freedom one just simply because I didn't need the hammer one yet. I was thinking I would switch to the hammer one because that's better for overall power. But even at level 117, and I've lost, you know, I'm down to a 2 set bonus now for tier. Obviously no legendary effects, but I didn't have legendary... Well, no, actually that's a lie. I had Sephir's Secret, so I could get a load of extra haste out of that. But I'm still tearing through everything. You know, and my gear is now getting close to where quest gear is on a par with my actual gear. It's close to it. So I haven't replaced a lot yet, but it's getting there now. Am I streaming any gameplay later? No, because I'm not going to do any gameplay later. I'm going to do painting and I'll do some leveling tomorrow, but at crap time, so no. I will stream tomorrow because I've now, you know, the Twitch stream times are going to be Wednesday and Sunday and see how that goes. With potentially occasionally impromptu ones every now and then, but, you know, in terms of regular ones. So I'll stream something. Well, obviously there'll be plenty to do. But I expect by the time I stream tomorrow evening, I will have finished leveling up. But I'm going to do it bit by bit. I'm not like going at it because I don't need to do it in a rush. I'm not like trying to get myself Mythic Raid ready. If I was still going to be doing Mythic Raiding, I definitely would have already been 120. You know, and I'd have been buying some of the 350 BOEs and stuff like that. I'd have, at the very least, bought myself a 350 sword. Or weapon, should we say, because there's some axes as well. Maybe I'll still be lucky. Maybe I'll actually get one drop for me. That would be nice. But as soon as I do hit 120, I'm taking war mode off because, you know, I don't need it. And as soon as I'm not getting the experience bonus, again, pointless. Absolutely pointless. In fact, it's actually just as well not all of my things sold, my experience gems, because I could actually do with sending another one to my paladin because I put the gem in my legs, you know, leg slot, and I've now got some better legs, like much better legs, so I could do with getting rid of them. But I didn't want to get rid of the experience bonus. So I need to send some over. Aha. Right, what was I wanting? Why do people have to sell their shitty little stacks of 47 or 35? 10% extra reward. What reward? I don't give a shit. I'm not going to be a serious Mythic Raider. Don't care. What you get is 100% or an infinity percent more death squads with going around with the express, you know, interest of kicking your bollocks in. It may not have happened yet, because obviously a lot of people are still leveling. But at some point, the death squads are going out there. No more Mythic Raiding for me. I've done my last Mythic Raid last week, and Taurus. Hi, everyone. So, you know, basically, you know, job and a few other things are effectively going to make it not feasible. It was already getting close. The number of drawbacks that there are now was not helping, but you know, work is just going to stop it completely, and then after Christmas something else is going to stop it completely as well. What are the gems selling for, Tay? Sod all. Yeah, last night they looked like they were selling for quite a lot. Now they're worthless, basically worthless. There's like 30 pages of them and they're selling for a few hundred. It's not worth doing. Pointless. Because I've just been on now I was going to relist the ones that didn't sell. No point. It's not worth it anymore. That's what I mean. Just profession, as far as I can tell, profession, crafted stuff in general. It's like, and maybe this is testament to the profession change that Blizzard have put in, because it used to be the case that although you could craft some things with like one skill, you did it better somehow with higher skill. Whereas with BFA, you know, there was no difference between someone who was level, what was the maximum, 700 tailoring before this new system came in, and someone who didn't have tailoring at all. It made no difference. So maybe a lot of people have taken this, especially I suppose with Legion, this idea that, you know, if you get rid of a profession, then get it back, you can just buy a tome from a vendor and get all your patterns back as well. I think it's so easy now just to swap your professions around. You almost wonder if there's any point in having to choose professions at this point. Maybe come up with another system entirely. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that people are doing so much crafting and then trying to sell it on the auction house. The auction house on my realm, at least, or whatever realms the auction house is connected to, are awash with everything. Everything I've tried to look up that's crafted, there's loads of them, and they're all quite cheap at the moment. They are pretty cheap. Right, I need to buy another thing. It takes so long to buy anything though, because there's so much stuff. There's so much ore. There's so many of everything I'm trying to look up. It's takes forever with, what am I using? Auctionator, to actually be able to buy anything at all. But yeah, but no, with war mode, I never intended to keep going until it became a pain in the ass. As soon as I get to level cap, I don't care. You know, I'm only going to do it because I'm philosophically against the concept of constant leveling. You know, I like the idea of having to do quest lines because, I mean, we've said it before, haven't I? That Like, to access the world quests, you have to complete all the main quest chapters in each zone, and get you get your rep naturally anyway. So they could just do that, and so a few other things as well. Just have the quests as either something that people just do because they enjoy it, or certain quests as like attunements, which already exist. I really don't see the point for leveling. But anyway, the point is that, you know, I don't like it. I don't like leveling. I don't mind the questing. I just don't like the leveling aspect of it, especially when you get a level and it means nothing. In fact, it's worse than meaning nothing. So every time I ding, another thing I've noticed, I don't know if anyone's noticed this, I've never noticed this in any previous expansion except maybe vanilla. It's not smooth. Dinging is not smooth. As soon as I do a thing that'll give me enough experience to ding, the whole game just freezes for a couple of seconds. And then just, I know I've dinged because the game just freezes. I don't know if that's just me. But as soon as you do it, there's nothing exciting. It's like, there's no, oh, I can get a talent, or I can get this, or there's a, you're actually just weaker because obviously there's scaling in there. So you're just weaker. You know you're going to be slower. Same thing happens to you. It's happened to me on every ding. It's not just been once or twice. It's every single one. The game just freezes. And I've never experienced, as I say, vanilla was the last time I remember anything like that. Now, I'm not going to right hand swear to God that I've never had it before, but it's suddenly occurred to me, this expansion, that's been happening. Yeah, maybe not leveling yet. Well, you'll have to see what it's like when you do. I mean, I'm sure, you know, it may not happen to everyone. I'm sure everyone's getting a different experience. I mean, you know, even when it was running relatively smoothly, I did notice, for example, that you'd sometimes get the wheel coming up in the middle of the screen, loading game data. So you could sort of tell, even when it's running all right, the game is on the edge. It's just about managing. Just about. It's a shame we'll never know as well. I'd be super curious to find out how many unique accounts have accessed Battle for Azeroth content in the last, well, at the moment, 20.5 hours. But, you know, let's say in the first 24 hours of it. But they don't give out that information. In fact, someone got into trouble for even hinting at how many people were playing Legion at the start of Legion. So they keep that secret, which is a shame, because I am curious to know what issues there have been, without, you know, exaggerating them. Is it just down to a huge amount of people playing it because they're hyped for whatever reason? Or is it just that BFA is technically much more challenging than Legion was? Or, you know, whatever it happens to be. Right, I'm going to craft myself, just before I get off this, I'm going to craft myself a load of rings and see if one of them is blue quality, because that would be fantastic. No, it's useless dual crafter. Never mind, let's log out of that. I still haven't also seen that interview with Ian Hazacostas trying to defend the storyline things as well. But from what I gathered, they were trying to talk about ambiguities, whereas my issue with it is not ambiguities. You haven't heard about launch trouble? Well, no, for a lot of people, I'm sure it has. It was fine for me for several hours. You could tell that it was struggling, but it was managing. But there was an entire realm on the EU called Draenor, which is a huge realm as well. It's not a little realm. Massive. And that was completely down. What's my impression of the Kulturas introduction cutscenes? Depends whether you mean the cutscenes that were in the beta, or do you mean the one that I haven't seen yet because I haven't played it as Alliance. There's one cinematic in terms of the Zandalari fleet destroying the Alliance fleet that I've only seen from the Horde point of view because they don't put those in beta. But the rest of it I've seen from the beta. So it depends what you mean. But yeah, if you're talking about the cinematic that wasn't shown in beta, I haven't seen the Alliance one yet. But if you mean the Kulturas introduction scenes where Jaina gets off the boat and is arrested, then again, yeah, okay, so yeah. I mean, it's... When I first saw it, it was a bit of a surprise, I have to say, because I saw it months ago. But for people who would only have been seeing it like in the last day for the first time, it all follows on from what's come before with that Warbringer stuff and that comic, isn't it? You know, that Jaina's people are not very happy with her, and she sort of agrees with them, and she's willing to submit herself to their judgment, which is an epic waste of time. You've got a war going on, and you've got a super powerful mage. And Blizzard have bent over backwards to try and emphasize just how powerful Jaina is, because on the one hand, they first of all had her coming in a flying ship, firing magical bolts out of the cannons, and then in the Horde scenario where you have to escape Stormwind, Princess Talanji, who is herself built up as being a powerful magic user, takes one look at Jaina and say, you know, so basically you're in a Horde group. You've got Princess Talanji, who's supposed to be fairly powerful, Zol the Prophet, who's supposed to be fairly powerful in some way as well. You've got Thalyssra, the first Arcanist, you know, and Princess Talanji takes one look at Jaina and says, we're buggered. Let's get out of here. Completely buggered. So... yeah, so they built Jaina up to be this massively... I mean, she was always considered very powerful, of course. But I think they're really ramping up her power at the moment. And then for her to just quietly sit in a cell while this war is raging is the stuff of stupidity. The storyline at the moment is just doing my head in a way that it hasn't before. I'm not saying the writing has always been top-notch before. Like the game writing, the books have always been, you know, pretty well written. But the game stuff has always had dodgy aspects to it. But at the moment, it's really doing my head in. So 4 or 5 of the biggest NA realms were down for like 5 hours after launch. Oh dear. Made us to be some errand boys. Well, we often get that anyway, don't we? It doesn't matter how powerful we have been. We are still, yeah, we still end up being the gopher. There's always those sorts of quests. At least we're not picking through shit this time. I mean, that happened. There was several expansions in a row where we had to do that. Couldn't even give that job to a peasant. Do we already know what happened to Saurfang after the Siege of Lordaeron? Yes. Yes, if you're on the Horde side, you do. Not on the Alliance side, admittedly. So he's in the... well, you do, because he was taken to the stockades. So what happens is, if you haven't done them from the Horde point of view, so as Horde players, Sylvanas sends you to the stockades to break out a political prisoner. It's not Saurfang, though. But you do come across Saurfang. You find his cell. Now, as far as you, the player, are aware, because Sylvanas didn't tell you who you've been sent to break out, you weren't informed of that, even though she apparently trusts you implicitly. So you go in the cell as if, oh, Saurfang, here you go, come on, let's break you out. And he says, you know as well as I do, you're not here to rescue me. And he also says that he will not rejoin Sylvanas's horde under any circumstances. Now, we leave with the cell door open, and we've basically killed all the guards. But quite whether he escaped or whether he decided to stay in his cell, I don't know. I really don't imagine he would have willingly stayed in the cell. That seems silly. So I imagine he has now escaped, but I haven't seen anything in the beta that sort of says what has actually happened to him at the moment. So he's faded into the background, I guess, unless someone has seen something that I haven't, to be brought back at some point later in the expansion. My money is on him going and going to find Thrall. That's what my money's on. And I suspect that that will start off the storyline that we know is coming because they sort of suggested this at BlizzCon, but I've not seen anything of it, which makes me think future patch, where Thrall will take Vol'jin's ashes and say, right, let's go to Zandalar and let's try and sort all this shit out. We were actually wielding artifact weapons. Yeah, but we burnt our artifact. We're always doing something. I mean, in TBC, we stuffed down one of the lieutenants of the Legion down a hole. And at the start of Wrath, like I say, we were picking through our own shit. Every expansion, we've done something momentous at the end of it. And it always seemed to ramp up. It used to get more and more epic. And we just keep going down. He said he'll talk about honour with Anduin if Anduin visits him. Well, he said if Anduin... He says if he survived, didn't he? They may have already met up. You've got to bear in mind, you know, at the end of... There's a period of time between the end of the Lordaeron scenario and the start of this one. And it's not just that you get the impression that there's a passage of time. Not a long time, like a week as it was in reality. But Sao Fang himself says he's lost count of the days that he's been in there. So, you know, it's at least a good week, you would think. And I think because in real time it's a good week, you probably expect that's what it is. So there's been plenty of time for Anduin to have gone and met with Sao Fang already. They may have already have had a conversation. We just haven't seen it. But is Samdi gonna res Vol'jin? I don't think he's really into resurrecting. He sort of allowed the resurrection of Rastakhan when threatened by Razan. He's not a fan of giving up souls. He's not very happy when people have the temerity to live longer than he would like. I'm not entirely sure he's into giving up the souls once he's got them. As I say, when he was forced to give up Rastakhan's soul, you know, that was him being bullied into it. He just realised that, you know, maybe he's got a bit of prophecy that he wouldn't be deprived of it for that long. Or maybe he just knew what Zul was up to. But Samdi must really hate us. Well, he doesn't get all of our souls. I often think, though, when I'm playing through the Nazmir questline, which I do like. See, yeah, so the order, I was saying before, the order I do it in is Vol'dun first, just to get the main storyline out of the way, because I'm not a huge fan of the storyline in Vol'dun. And, you know, as I say, it's just the best one to do with the best gear. Then I do Zuldazar. I quite like that questline, that's alright. But mostly the main questline, I'm not so keen on a lot of the side questlines. And then I do Nazmir, because as far as I'm concerned, I will do the whole of Nazmir, no problem at all. Because I really like Nazmir. I like the ambience of it, and it's quite spooky in certain areas. And I also like the questlines. But I do often think with some of the interactions with it, there would surely be a difference between the way Bwonsamdi talks to me as a blood elf and how he would talk to a Darkspear troll. Because as a blood elf, he's not getting my soul unless some jiggery-pokery happens. He's not automatically getting my soul. But as a Darkspear troll, he would be. And if you're a troll player, you are a Darkspear, at the moment anyway, a Darkspear troll player. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you die there, Bwonsamdi, yeah, he also gives you, when you've done a certain questline, a boon, where you get like a res, you know, like a shaman res, reincarnate. And that's another reason for doing Nazmir last as well, because there's buffs all over the bloody place. You pick them up off the ground, it gives you buffs to stats and whatever. It's really good. So, you know, when your gear's at its shittest and you're going to have the toughest time on mobs, Nazmir is the ideal place to do it. Elves evolve from trolls, yes. But Bronsamdi doesn't automatically... The reason he automatically gets Darkspear trolls is not because they're trolls. It's because Vol'jin struck a deal with Bronsamdi years ago. That's why. Before that, he wasn't necessarily automatically getting them. They have to be pledged to him for him to get them. He's not like Death in the Grim Reaper sense. The souls that he gets have to be pledged to him. Which means that someone... It either has to be someone pledging you the souls of their people, as Vol'jin did, or it has to be a bit like a Jack Sparrow sense, where someone has got to murder someone for the purpose of donating their soul to you, or something. So most of the Horde players, their souls wouldn't go to him. I don't think it wasn't really Warcraft 3. But some of it was in a novel and not at all. Although I think Vol'jin striking the deal with him was in the game. But when was it? I think it must have been Wrath, because I played Horde in Wrath. But then there was, you know, there was another little thing between Vol'jin and Bronsamdi in a novel, like a Mr. Pandaria novel, where, you know, Vol'jin told Bronsamdi that he wasn't going to start a war just to give him a load of extra souls. After finishing 2 of the ally zones, you can say, where nothing really changed. What do you mean nothing really changed? Borealis changes. The Horde ones are the more lore-heavy ones because they're the ones most related to the first raid. I suspect the Alliance ones will have more relevance later. I've quite liked the levelling in most expansions. I was probably least keen on TBC. Well, as an expansion, I quite liked it, but in terms of the levelling, I didn't like a lot of the levelling in TBC. Most of the other expansions, I've quite liked the levelling process, although not Cataclysm. No, actually, I wasn't a fan of Cataclysm either. But I did enjoy levelling in WoD. Have I tried Aldir? Yes. Yes. I've done some raid testing on, not on Mythic difficulty, but I've done some LFR, Normal and Heroic. Although when I did it on LFR, it was during the period of time, which they always seem to do, where it was hideously overtuned. Like worse than normal or heroic mode. Like Talok, I did an LFR Talok, and it was just going to be carnage, wiped about 7 times before I gave it a day. Because the shit it drops, which on LFR it's going to drop everywhere, was massively damaging. You stood in there for like 2 seconds, you died. Impossible on LFR like that. Ah, yeah, Zalazane, yes, he had something to do with it. So basically, yeah, Vol'jin basically needed Bronsamdi's help. And Bronsamdi, you know, doesn't give his help for free. You know, he requires souls. So that's always the deal. So as anyone who's quested in Nazmir will now know, you know, you only earn, as a player, earn his favour because he quite likes the look of your big beefy sword. And he thinks you're going to send a load of souls his way, and he's not wrong. What do I think about it overall? Like I've said leading up to it, I've not at all been hyped for BFA. That doesn't mean to say I think it's a bad expansion. There's nothing really that I'm looking forward to in it. Obviously, I'm spending more time on WoW than I am any other hobby still. So I still enjoy it, otherwise I'd just be a masochist. But I don't find it as interesting as previous expansions. Out of all the lowers, he's chosen Bunsamdi. Yeah, but Bunsamdi, presumably, because they've got different powers as well, he's quite powerful. I forget the details. It was a very long time ago. If it was even explained, because like I say, when you're talking about a storyline in a game, the game storylines are not always very well explained. But for whatever reason, he thought that was... Oh, yeah. Oh, was it? No. Because there was a bit where Vol'jin, borrowing storylines again, although it's Thrall that technically borrowed Vol'jin, Vol'jin lost connection to the other lower. So the only lower he could talk to then was Bunsamdi. But that was later, actually. That wasn't at that time. That was in the novel, I think. Oh, Uldir. No, it was too... Some of the fights are really nice, but some of them are gimmicks. I don't like gimmick fights. Like, for example, there's a game of netball. Or no, basketball, I suppose, might be a better way of describing it. On Gahoon. So the very last boss, and what you're going to find yourself doing, is playing basketball on the sides of it. I do not like gimmick features in bosses. Hate it. I hated fights that had vehicle combat in it. So I hated, for example, Malagos and Professor Putricide and stuff like that. I don't find them at all interesting. I wouldn't have minded. Obviously, I didn't progress through Ulduar because I'd quit by then. But if I had done it, I did Ulduar later. You know, the starting fight where you're in the tanks and stuff like that, I'd be sort of okay with that, although it lasts too long in my opinion. I'd be sort of okay with that because it's the first fight. I'm not at all a fan of it if it's going to be one of the tough fights. Because I think it's shit. I don't like it at all. Before Siege of... Yes, it was before Siege of Orgrimmar, yes. So yeah, so I mean, if we look at some of the fights, as I say, some of them are quite nice. Mother's quite nice. Talok's all right. It sort of depends how you do it. If you melee, it can be an arsehole for melee though. In fact, that's your first experience of Uldir. There's two trash mobs. They're basically tentacles, and they are there to tell you in no uncertain terms that you are not welcome as melee. Because, and if you haven't seen them yet, you will. They're horrendous for melee. You know, there might as well be a sign at the front of the raid saying melee not welcome. That's not on all bosses, of course, but there are, like Talok, depending on how you do it. Like, for example, the last time I did some testing on it, I think it might have been the one where we killed it in the guild I was in, and I was intending to mythic raid with. So it came down for the third phase, and what happens is you know, several people every now and then get this debuff where they're going to drop puddles, and it's bad shit, and it stays forever as well, until you can clear it with the boss. But most of it's just going to stay there forever, or at least for that phase. Now, what was happening is people were just placing it everywhere, and then there came a point where there was one little patch behind the boss where you could be in melee range and attack the boss, and then someone with the puddles walked right across the back of the boss. So at that point, couldn't get in melee range of it because it does too much damage to stay in it. So, you know, there was a period of a good 20 seconds where I could do, apart from Judgment when that came off cooldown or something, I could do nothing. I just stood back going, oh, stay out of harm's way. Nothing to be done. How many 120 rep paladins up in here? Well, not the one on camera, certainly. Mother's fine though. Mother's all right. I'm trying to remember the names. I can picture the boss. I can't always remember the names. Zekvar, because I mix them up as well. I think if the bug one is all right as well. There's no issue with that. I think that's fine. Some of them might be a bit of a pain in the arse on LFR, I have to say. Fetid Devourer, which is like the three-headed doggy thing. That's okay. That's fine. Although, again, I can see that being a pain in the arse on in a pug. Not so much LFR, but in a pug. I can see that being a pain. Oh, who's still 110 when the game's been out for now? Basically 21 hours. That's just slacking. The boss with the... that does like the genetic-y thingy boss that produces those horror things and then occasionally disappears and turns into a pool of blood that shoots out spiky things. That is a dreadful boss for melee. Bloody awful. Actually, not bloody awful, but it's a bad one. It's not a good one, I don't think. Again, though, you can sometimes make it better depending on the tactics you use. No, Aaron, I mean, that's how it used to be for me. You know, this is the first expansion ever where I've actually... It's actually ironic. It's the first expansion ever where if I wanted, I could have pulled an all-nighter, apart from the period of time when the game kept kicking me out. But I could have pulled an all-nighter and just leveled up. But it's also the first time I've been playing an expansion launch, because I didn't play a Cataclysm expansion launch, but it's the first time I've played an expansion launch and not actually been in a hurry. So I've now got the time to be in a hurry, but I don't need to be in a hurry. It's, you know, life does these things to me. It likes kicking me up the ass. Amazon didn't deliver your copy of BFA. Oh, do you know what? You're not going to like me then. Basically, I was going to get the physical collector's edition. And I can't remember exactly what happened. Because then I decided I wasn't going to get it. I thought, no, it's shit. I'm not bothering. But then I was on the stream, and I got an email saying, oh, your copy of Battle for Azeroth is going to be delivered tomorrow. And I thought, oh shit, I thought I'd cancel that. So I hadn't. So, this was the nightmare of it. So I thought to myself, so I instantly put on the thing saying, no, I want to cancel it. Obviously you can't cancel it once because the confirmation was for it's now going to be delivered. But to announce my intention that I'm, you know, not having it. And I want a refund. So obviously it would arrive today. Now it should be a simple thing. Amazon guy arrives, or person delivering the Amazon thing, and I say, sorry, don't want it. Unfortunately, Amazon were also delivering other things for me today. Which I might show you in a minute. So, and the Amazon guy arrived with 3 boxes, and I thought, oh shit, I've got to try and work out. Obviously, you can't open a box and then refuse delivery. And I also know that the guys who do these deliveries are obviously on a timer, so I felt very conscious of the fact I'm being a pain in the arse to this poor fella. So I wanted to do it as quickly as possible. And I looked at the box and I picked this one and I thought, yeah, this is the only one that can possibly have it in. I'll reject this one. Get these 2. But he scanned in the ones I was going to accept. I quickly opened them to make sure that they were what I thought they were, and they were, thank God. So yeah, so I've refused to accept the BFA collector's edition. But it arrived today, which is not the same as arriving yesterday, which is if I actually wanted it, would have been a good time to arrive. But I had them on digital anyway. I'd have probably just given the code away. But... yeah, I in the end, I just thought, no. I'm not someone who gets collector's editions for the sake of it. If I get a collector's edition, I want there to be something in it that I want. And there isn't. There's a story that contradicts the game story, and therefore I consider to be... I'm always going to, unless Blizzard say otherwise, I'm going to say that game takes precedence if they're published at the same time. You get like a big old coin thingy. I don't know what the point of that is. You get like, there's just shit in it. It's just shit. I didn't want it. So yeah. But yeah, so what arrived, basically. Unfortunately, it's causing me a bit of trouble. And I'm going to need other things to make it worse. I don't want the shiny new horse. What's shiny new horse? You get the shiny new horse with the digital collector's edition. The only thing you get with the physical collector's edition is the physical stuff, which is not a horse, as far as I could tell. And in actual fact, the horse, neither of the mounts in the collector's edition actually look all that great. It could be wondered at as to why I even got the digital collector's edition, given that, yeah, the Raptor mount looks good, don't get me wrong, but I don't like Raptor mounts because the bouncing up and down gives me a bit of motion sickness, so I can't be doing with that. And the horse looks nice, but it doesn't look stunning. So no, I'm not impressed with the Alliance shiny thing. But yeah, what they were delivering, basically, with the Warhammer, I was been watching some battle reports recently, and I was going, eventually, this is sometime, I don't think this would necessarily even be by the end of the year, maybe if I'm lucky. But eventually what I want to be doing is recording them. The parrot mounts look awesome. The bee mount, I want the bee mount. The bees, I love the bee mounts. I love the bees. You know, going to Stormsong Valley, my favourite part, it's my favourite zone, just in terms of what it looks like. But my favourite of the favouriteest bit of that zone is the bees. I love the bees. I think they look amazing. The physical collector's gift gave you a couple of new mounts. I don't think it does. No. Physical collector's editions only give you physical. Any digital reward you always get with the digital collector's edition. So no, it didn't give you anything. All the extra stuff was just the physical stuff. It gave you the digital rewards as well, but you got that with the digital collector's edition. No, I'm not aware of how we get the bee mount. It might be that we don't, although I'd be very disappointed, because you can ride a bee, because it's at the honey monster area. If you use the flight point there, you're on a bee. You don't actually look very good. You have to zoom out and go from behind, because from the front, you're like that. You can't really see with the things. As if you're holding onto some reins. There's no reins there. So it does look a bit... You want the medallion thing. It looked a bit silly to me, the medallion thing. It looked unnecessarily large, and I didn't really see the point in it. I have to be honest. So yeah, anyway, for whatever reason, you know, because I think I ordered the collector's edition at a time when I was just thinking, it was at a time when I was thinking, I used to get collector's editions of things and then I don't. And I was thinking, well, maybe I should again. And then I thought about it later and I thought, no, I don't actually like the stuff in it, so I just stopped. I did actually get a mount drop last night, though. The June Stalker thingy in Vol'dun. Just from random mobs. I'm not sure how common that is. But I'm not actually keen on it. I don't think I've even learnt it yet. It's still in my bags. You've been wondering if the B mount was meant to be a rep mount. Which rep? The bee people? Or is that going to be a future rep? I mean, new reps do appear, of course, as an expansion goes on. You know, the Busy Bees faction coming in. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I agree, though, that Horde and Alliance players would want the B mount. You know, I don't think it would be a sensible idea for Blizzard to make it just Alliance, say. That would be mad. The medallion is an old style wax seal for making large documents, like people do. You don't need it to be that. It'd be better with like a signet ring or something for something like that. But anyway, for whatever, I didn't want it anyway. Either way, it just didn't. And it's a lot of extra money, and it's not like, because you might look at the cost of it and you think, well, you also get the digital rewards with it. Well, I don't, because I already got the collector's digital version on one of my accounts. So all I would have been paying that money for was the physical stuff. And it's more as well. And I just thought, I don't want it. So I was just being silly, really. So yeah, I just got to wait for that refund to come through. The beekeepers cometh. Well, maybe we can get some cosmetic gear that has like the beekeeper suits. That'd be quite nice. Why the Alliance just got 3 horse recalls, didn't they, with rep mounts? They are just basically horses that all look pretty much the same. It is disappointing, I agree. I thought they were very, very disappointing. But anyway, would you like to see my new toy? It's 0 value for World of Warcraft. But as I say, for recording battle reports, I thought to myself, I can't just fix a static camera. Because that was the original plan. But then I've seen some people do battle reports and I've thought, well, that's loads better. So, with comments, I'll wait for another law. We could sack the war table and replace with a series of beehives. And send the bees out on missions. Yes, we could. Yeah. Kulturas feels like questing through Stormheim. 3 times. See, I got the opposite impression, Kurux. My issue is, like, with the Horde zones, for me, they all seem too samey. So, you've got, even Nazmi, I like Nazmi, but basically it's a swamp. That's it. There's a bit of beach in Zandalar. But otherwise Zandalar's a jungle, and then Voldun's just a desert. That's what you've got. You've got a desert in Voldun, a jungle, all right, bit of beach in Zandalar, and you've got a swamp in Nazmir. Whereas for the Alliance, so take Drustvar for example, you've got a mountain region, but you've also got spooky wood region. You know, you've got like Stormsong Valley, you've got sort of harbour areas, but then sort of bit windswept, you've got some island stuff as well, but then you've got like bright sunny hills. It's almost like Teletubby land with the bees, my favourite bees in there. So in each of the Alliance zones, I think you have at least 2 distinct types of terrain, whereas in the Horde areas, you don't. They're just always the same. I didn't like that about the Horde stuff. Kulturas has too much Phantom of the... Well, I wouldn't describe it as Phantom of the Opera. It's more like that programme with the spooky kids in it, isn't it? Well, literally. It's all Hammer horror stuff, isn't it? But that's Drustvar. It's not the rest of it, you know. As I say, the other zones have got nothing to do with that. That's what I mean. You've got different characters in the Horde ones as well. It's just that the Horde zones are the same all the way through the zones, which I was disappointed with. I wouldn't have minded it if there were more zones. It's not the fact that I'm disappointed that a zone has only one type of terrain in it. It's the fact that there's only 3 types of terrain in your entire levelling experience. Well, Horde haven't had their own zones really before now. You know, in previous expansions, it wasn't really a thing. Has there ever been an expansion where... Oh, I suppose Warlords of Draenor. Horde got 1 starter zone, Alliance got 1 starter zone. But in terms of that, in terms of every other expansion, obviously Vanilla itself has Horde and Alliance zones. But, I mean, it's the end of the day, that's the character of it. Horde like living in desolate shitholes. That's, you know, unfortunately what they're like. You got the Witcher vibes. I suspect you're supposed to from Drustvar. Even though I haven't actually played Witcher. But I imagine you are... I've seen cinematics. I imagine you are supposed to get exactly that vibe. What about leveling? Eastern Kingdoms had better questing zones. Yes, but that also included the Night Elf zones being shit as well. Apart from Felwood, I liked Felwood, and I also liked Ungoro Crater in Kalimdor, in vanilla stuff. But by and large, yes. But that also includes the Plaguelands and all the undead areas I thought were better than Alliance ones in Kalimdor as well. I just thought Kalimdor was just desolate. In fact, the zone that's sort of literally desolate is like the worst zone I've... Apart from Blade's Edge Mountains, actually, no, it's the second worst zone I've ever tried questing in. I hated it. After playing BFA leveling, you're 100% on the same page as Preach. 2 good zones and 1 bad. 2 bad and 1 good for Ally. Well, no, I thought the Alliance zones were all really good. And the Horde ones, the only ones I didn't like was Vol'dun. No, I mustn't play Witcher. I already have computer games that I don't have time to play. The last thing I need is another one. Winter Spring was sort of okay. It depends, though. There were some bits that were... The problem with Winter Spring is there was too much... Go and do a bit of a quest here, then go other end of the world, and then come back. Now, I know I said I liked the idea of getting a quest for someone where you had to go to the other end of the world. What I didn't like about Winter Spring is you go to the other end of the world, then come back, then go to a different end of the world, and then come back, and all the rest of it. It was too much. So, although whilst I was in Winter Spring, I sort of enjoyed it. I did not relish the fact that I knew that very shortly it would send me to some arse end of nowhere place for a brief period, only to come back. But yeah, I am... No, I quite like the zones in it, as I say, apart from Vol'dun. Vol'dun, there's so many things about Vol'dun I don't like. So, I mean, as soon as I finish with Nazmir, I am going to have to go back there just to do a few more quests, because I'm very close to Honoured with the Vol'dun Eye. But then I'm going to go back to Nazmir to finish my levelling off, I think, because I quite like Nazmir. Apart from anything else, those Vulpera are just ridiculous. I can't. They're just furry gnomes. I can't be bear to be around them. They're the most pathetic creatures. I don't understand what everyone sees in them. Someone even tried to convince me that they're actually mighty warriors, because when you go to Vol'dun, you're trapped in a cage, and it's a Vulpera that breaks you out as if they're some mighty warrior. But they're not. Because they break you out for their own survival. They don't break you out because they're nice. I'm not saying they're not nice, but it's not for that reason. They want you to protect them. And when you take them... I know they're literally furry goblins, but the way they behave is as furry gnomes. And then you take it to a weapon rack, and you have to choose the weapons for it. So this supposedly mighty warrior of the Vulpera race is not even capable of selecting its own weapons from a rack. Would I take Vulpera into the Alliance? Good God, no. Oh, if Horde agreed to take gnomes. No, because actually I think Vulpera are even more pathetic than gnomes. I think they're more pathetic. I think Blizzard have actually created... See, the thing is as well, another thing, I don't believe it'll ever become a playable race. I don't actually know where people get it from. If they ever made Vulpera a playable race, it would be completely at odds with the way they introduce new races. Because whenever they bring a new race into the game, it's always one that's related to the expansion in which it's introduced. And they're always introduced at the start of that expansion. Well, they haven't been introduced at the start of this expansion. And if they decide to bring out a couple of new races next expansion, which is perfectly possible. They do seem to alternate. Vulpera will have... They're this expansion's. So if there's a new race next expansion, it'll be one that's related to next expansion. You're upset about not being able to switch to any of the allied races as a Horde Rep Paladin. Ah, well, I am convinced that... Oh, I don't think Paladin will be an option with when Zandalari Trolls, are first introduced. But I am utterly convinced that the storyline is leading to it by the end of the expansion. So Zandalari Troll Paladins will be a thing. I am certain. Hiya, Jack. I am absolutely certain of that. Because otherwise, that whole storyline about them losing their contact with the light and Lady Liadrin earwigging going, oh, I might be able to help you there, would make no sense at all. Not that I'm saying she's earwigging, but I bet she is. She's got big enough ears for it. But I suppose it is more disappointing because Horde already basically have no choice over Paladins. Night Elf Paladins, I mean, they've laid the groundwork for it, so they could introduce them anytime they like. But I suppose the argument is that Alliance don't need more. You know, they've already got humans, dwarfs, Dark Iron dwarfs, very well. Basically now, in theory, they're in now. You've just got to complete achievements to be able to get them. Draenei, Lightforged Draenei. You know, have I missed anything out? Can't remember now. Don't think so. No known Paladins. Where is it? Hold on. Don't make me play it. Oh no. Oh, for goodness sake. Go down there, you fool.
Sorry, no current plans for known paladins, but maybe.
You've come round to the Cultman Druid
Mr. Known Paladin.
I don't know.
His screen
I'm
name.
still to be sold on them, but it doesn't really matter for me.
We
I
want
quite like
to
the...
try to be as flexible as possible when it comes to, you know, the race class combinations.
Speaking of Mr.
Part of it is like the nature of paladins. It's this like orderly dedication to the light, this combination of things that feels somewhat at odds with gnomish nature.
There you go. Yeah, I'm not sure. I certainly wouldn't be tempted to have a Zandalari Troll Druid, although I like the concept of it. Again, it's the raptor thing. I can't be doing raptors. Just messes my head up. Most of the Horde can... Yeah, well, Shamans is the equivalent thing, you see. Because at the start of World of Warcraft, Shamans was the Horde-only class and Paladins were the Alliance-only class. And they got numerous options as a direct result of that time. And then options for each have been added since. How can gnomes be priests but not paladins? They shouldn't even be priests. The problem there is not the fact that gnomes can't be paladins. The problem is that they were made priests. That should never have been a thing. Ever. Eight Horde Shaman. Are there? Really? Hold on, are there? I've never really thought about that. So you've got Orc. Well, let's go to the original ones first. So you've got Orc, Tauren, Troll. Can't be undead. What came next? Blood Elves can't be Shamans. What came next? Goblins can be Shamans, can't they? What the hell's a gnome Sparkle? Can Pandaren be Shamans? They can't be Shamans, can they? I don't know my bloody Shamans. Can they? Oh. And then more recently, I suppose you're going to tell me that Moose Men can be. Nightborn surely can't. And Magar orcs, I suppose. Hold on, go on. So orcs, Tauren, trolls from the original races. Then goblins. Then Pandaren, you say. Then Magar orcs and moose men. Well, that's 7. Where's the 8th one? What am I missing out then if there's 8? Can't think of another. I could easily sort it out, couldn't I? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's 7, not 8. Whereas paladins, for Alliance, you've got human, dwarf, from the original races, and then Draenei, can't be Pandaren, can't be Worgen, Lightforged Draenei, Dark Iron Dwarf, don't know about Kulturans when they come in, but we don't know about that. Aside if no one should ever have been priest, if a race can be a warrior and a priest, they should be able to be a paladin. Under normal circumstances, I would agree. Absolutely. However, like I say, the concept of a gnome being either a warrior or a priest is ridiculous. I don't get it. I understand that they allowed them to be warriors because basically everything can be warriors. That was obviously just their plan at the start. If every race can have a warrior option, because they just obviously someone at Blizzard saw warriors as being like troglodytes. Anyone can master being a warrior, so they allowed gnome warriors. I can only imagine that's the way it went. They should never have allowed them to be priests. And the thing is, someone made a mistake. Someone dropped the ball pretty badly. You know, I mean, this isn't just dropping the ball. This is dropping the ball in the toilet when you've just had a shit and not flushed it yet. That's what this is. And you only make that problem worse by then saying, well, they're already priests now, we might as well make them paladins as well. No, I mean, you just have to accept it. A mistake was made. You don't carry on building on the mistake. Tauren paladins were also... Do you know what? I mean, again, I might have said this a few times before as well. I remember in Vanilla, in Warsong Gulch one time, and I saw a Tauren in full Lightforge, which was the Paladin dungeon set. But of course, you know, it was a Tauren warrior because that was the only plate-wearing Horde character you could have. And I remember thinking when I saw this thing, because you could wear it. It's not that it was unsuitable for a warrior. You know, it was. But I remember looking at this thing and thinking to myself, thank God Tauren can't be paladins, because how ridiculous do they look? Roll on a few years later and there they were. Because you know what happened? I mean, I quit the game after tier 7, which is the first tier of Wrath, which was a shit tier. I came back, well, I sort of came back casually a bit later, but I wasn't there at the launch of Cataclysm, so I knew nothing about Cataclysm. I came back at the end of Firelands. And what did I come back to? I came back to Tauren Paladins and Gnome Priests. Could you imagine what I thought I was returning to at this point? I thought Blizzard had lost their minds. I couldn't believe it. I seriously couldn't believe it. I didn't know what they were doing. And the whole thing about the Gnome Priests, I was completely justified because the guild I joined, because I got myself back into raiding, I joined a guild, and it had a Gnome Priest. And this bastard used to keep... Do you know the priest, they had the... Well, they still do, don't they? But they had the life grip thing. I can't remember what it was actually called. But they have the life grip thing. He used to use that to grip me into shit at every opportunity. Evil little bastard. That's why you're not supposed to have gnome priests. They're not helpful. They're insidious. It's a shit show. Well, I don't know whether it was or not. I don't know how it went down amongst the community. But it was not a welcome home when I came back to the game and was like, you know, I mean, I still remember finding out that Tauren Paladins were a thing and finding out that Gnome Priests were a thing. I couldn't believe it. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. I can't remember. I used to just call it Life Grip. I think everyone just calls it Life Grip. But we stopped asking me would I trade Tauren Sunwalkers for Gnome Sparkles. I don't know what Gnome Sparkles are. I don't know what that means. You'll have to explain what that actually refers to. Don't watch anime. What if the gnome was sentient and did that as revenge due to your hatred of gnomes? How would they even know I hated gnomes? I just joined the guild. They could have had no idea what my attitude towards gnomes was. Do you know what they did as well in that guild? Later on, so it was Dragon Soul, and on Spine of Deathwing, you needed someone to gather up the bloods. You had to sort of gather up like 9 bloods or something and burst to be able to blow open the... to do something to another thing that blew open the plate. And so they got a tank to gather the bloods up, and it was my job to carefully kill the bloods at the right time. But the tank they gave the job to, and they did this on purpose, it was a gnome death knight, a blood death knight, but gnome. So the problem was that you've got all these bloods constantly hitting the death knight, and because it was a gnome, it kept squeak, because that's what gnomes do, they squeak when you hit them. It was just this constant, and because they knew that I played, because people keep saying to me, well, don't play with sound then. No, I want to play with sound. Why should I not play with sound? I don't play with music, but I want to play with sound. And so I had to be right over this thing, listening to all this squeaking constantly. Just my head. And people wonder why I behave as I do towards gnomes. I'm psychologically traumatized. And I'll bet you that gnome priest had something to do with that decision making, because he was an officer in the guild. Wasn't the raid leader, but he was an officer. I bet he had something to do with it. You made up a name for a gnome paladin. What? Player unknown. Character does not exist. Gnome monk doesn't make sense either. No, it doesn't make sense. As Ian Hazacosta said himself, gnomes are not serious. Monks supposed to like meditate for days on ends. Nice and serene, super serious. That's not gnomes. So it's not, no, you're quite right. Gnome monks don't make any sense either. In fact, you know, if you accept that gnomes are a playable race, because they never should have, that was mistake number 1, making them a playable race. And it was literally a mistake as well, because I don't think it was originally intended. I heard tell that Alliance, there was a time when Alliance were going to get goblins and not gnomes. There was no reason to give us gnomes. It wasn't really a thing. You know, they did it because, you know, they had to have orcs, trolls and Tauren. Obviously, they had to be Horde. They had to have undead in the game, and they couldn't be Alliance. And so the Alliance were basically going to have humans, dwarfs, and night elves. They needed a 4th one. They were basically scratching around. There were 3 sensible choices for Alliance and Horde. Forsaken had to be in, and they decided it made more sense for Forsaken to be Horde than Alliance, even though from a Warcraft 3 point of view they didn't fit in either. So they decided, but they were scratching around for the Alliance choice, and it was very nearly, I would have taken goblins. So that's what would have filled the gap for gnomes, goblins. That's what we were going to, that was actually plan A. Gnomes were plan B. I don't know who vetoed plan A, but they did in the game no service at all. Female Belf has weird elbows. I don't like the elbows. They're too spindly. Reminds me of aliens. Wouldn't I say that gnomes are the equivalent of hobbits? No, hobbits are no. Who has anything bad to say about hobbits? Hobbits are us. They're the common folk who just want to sit in a pub, drinking ale, you know, having a nice steak pie, and basically having a nice chat with your friends. That's what hobbits are. Nothing annoying about hobbits at all. There is no level of annoyance in hobbits. The only thing they've got in common is they both have a diminutive stature. But this isn't about how short they are. That's irrelevant. I'm not shortest, or heightest, whatever you want to call it. In the alpha, there was supposed to be one faction. Well, that would have been better as well. But I didn't know that. Or if I had, I've forgotten. Bilbo had quite a few bad things to say about some hobbits. No, he just basically was admitting that they weren't terribly sophisticated. Well, that doesn't matter. Most people aren't terribly sophisticated. Hobbits like to walk barefoot. Well, that's only really because they've got thick, leathery soles. Although the hobbits of the Marish and the Store don't wear. They don't go barefoot because it's very muddy around there, so they wear boots and stuff. So surely, why would Sam annoy me? He was the best hobbit. Sam was the best hobbit. That's why they got the best actor to play him in the films as well. The only one who even tried to put on a suitable accent. Or at least pulled it off. Fall of Gondolin comes out. I'd be totally happy with Hobbit Paladins. In Dungeons and Dragons, you could have Halfling Paladins. They weren't a terribly good choice because they were quite weak because they were little. But you could do it if you wanted. No issue with that at all. It's their character and their behaviour that's the problem with gnomes. Nothing to do with anything physical. It's entirely related to that spongy mess between those giant ears of theirs. In what sense do you think Merry and Pippin were the worst? What, the actors or the actual characters? Because in terms of the characters, Merry, without him, they wouldn't have defeated the Witch King. Where's that point? Kind of trouble with my lights. But anyway, I said when we came to a lull, because I want to show this off anyway, because it's going to be bloody, because I've done a thing, I always do these things. It's going to be months before I ever get to use this, because I always plan to use things and buy them before I ever do. Got an action camera. So I'm hoping to be able to set it up so that I can record games. I will need a separate voice recorder though, I won't be able to record sound on it. And I am disappointed it's got to be in the wet waterproof container to actually fix it to the helm strap. And I've got to, the straps are a bit tight, so I'll have to change that as well. But yeah. So I'm quite happy about that. I want to try it out. I've got to, I need to charge it up though and try it out. I shall do a bit of that tomorrow. Maybe it was just the actors. I found them annoying. Well, the thing is, what's his name? Boyd? Someone Boyd that played Pippin. I'm not quite sure how they got him in. But, like, Didn't even attempt to put I mean, Irish Hobbit was a bit weird. And Elijah Wood didn't attempt to put any accent on either. It was all a little bit disappointing. I don't even think that the films needed big name actors in it either, because some of the biggest parts were taken by unknown actors. I really don't see, you know, why they wouldn't just get people who could play the characters properly. Oh, I mean, the films were all very good. I quite happily watch the films and the extended version, all the rest of it. It's just that I just found a few things to be a bit disappointed. But, I mean, you'll never find a project like that totally to your liking, I suppose. I mean, the whole point of Merry and Pippin is they were just supposed to be there because they were brave and wanted to help their friend through things. They were supposed to be shit. That was basically the whole point of them. Jackson's movies were terrible. I don't think that's fair. Oh, the stuff they added. Well, here's the thing. Obviously, you can't do... It is impossible to do a film version of the book. It has long been... It's not just Jackson said that. It's long been said that. And it is true. But... So, there's certain things they had to change either because of pacing or anything like that. However... There were things that they deviated from that were not necessary. They just did it. Because the problem, ultimately, you get a situation where people writing a screenplay of a book that already exists. It always happens. They're creative people, especially when they're doing it for a big budget production. They've got a high opinion of themselves. They don't like to simply turn an established work into a screenplay. I think they must just consider it beneath them. So they always try and put their own stamp on it, and they write it as if they were writing it, which is a stunningly bad idea and it shouldn't be allowed. But it's inevitably going to happen, especially when it's almost always undertaken, or at least one of the team that does it is almost always someone super senior on the project. Peter Jackson in this particular case, who is basically in charge of the entire production. I'm complaining that an unknown race's accent is never described in the books had the wrong one. No, it is. We know what it's based on. He wrote and said loads of things about it. It's supposed to be based on the home counties. We know exactly what that sounds like. We just have to go there and ask someone in the street to speak for us. Oh, no, I'm not saying that all of them, but what I mean is like Aragorn, for example, huge character, not really terribly well known. You had Eowyn, who was not terribly well known. Theoden probably wasn't, the actor that plays Theoden probably wasn't well known in America. He was well known in Britain. So did some big actors. In fact, they wanted Sean Connery to play Gandalf. Could you imagine what was going through the casting director's head when they thought, I know, we should get Sean Connery to do Gandalf? What the hell was that about? Fortunately, Sean Connery, bless him, said, I don't get this, and turned it down. Thank Christ. I cannot imagine, and it's nothing to do with the voice, I cannot imagine him playing Gandalf at all. Where he wrote what, sorry? In his letters to the editor. He wrote loads of letters to the editor explaining the concept of everything. He was a professor of language, yes. Specifically of like Scandinavian dialects. Northern European stuff, basically. Name is Grey, Gandalf the Grey, yes. Well, that was only one of his names, of course. But yes. The scene where Gandalf drives the Nazgul from Faramir's retreat. Yeah, that's one of those things you can put in a film. That's fine. There's no issue with that. It didn't happen in the book, but that's fine because it's there for pacing in the film. Things like that are totally fine. The things that I took exception to was the biggest thing for me, which was an innocuous thing. And I know why they did it, but it was still really bad. So on Caladras, where the chain falls from Frodo's neck and Boromir picks it up. Now, the reason he's done it is because he's trying to show that the ring's effect on Boromir's mind taking hold. But it was the whole point of it was that the ring loses their bearer when it wants, when it chose to leave Smeagol. Right, it didn't choose to be picked up by Bilbo, but it did choose to leave Smeagol. That was the whole point. So when you lose the ring, you don't lose the ring loses you. That was quite important. So then you had this situation where that wasn't happening. So I didn't like that at all. He turned it down. Well, I mean, what he actually said, I don't know. I mean, I assume he had a project going at the time. He is an actor that's constantly in demand. But he just looked at it and he says, I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't think he was a Tolkien fan. Unlike Christopher Lee, he's like the biggest Tolkien fan in the world, I think. But yeah, I mean, which is good. It's actually quite nice that an actor will turn down a role if they don't understand it. I think that's good. You know, too many will just pick it up. And that's another thing that does my head in about films. When you interview actors and you ask them about something that would be best asked of the writers. I mean, yeah, okay, you can ask actors about their characters because they should understand their characters to play them. But when you ask them stuff about the storyline and stuff like that, I think, why are you asking the actors? They're just talking props. Ask the writers. Now, I thought The Lord of the Rings were a very good film series. I'm very glad they were done, even though they were done in the way they were. It's not like it's wall-to-wall gripes I have. I have a few gripes that weren't necessary. Nicolas Cage should have been Gandalf. I don't know. See, the problem is now that because Ian McKellen did a really good job of it, it's one of those situations where it's now hard to imagine anyone else doing it. Even though there were other people that, yes, could have done it. Christopher Lee has a familial link. He did meet Tolkien one time. I mean, he's like distant cousins or something. So he once got to meet him. They weren't close family, but they were related. But he's always been a huge fan of the book. He reads the books all the time. He has done a number of spoken word versions of the various books, including The Children of Hurin. But I think he's done audio books of quite a few of them. He wanted to be Gandalf, actually. But I think he was better as Saruman. Oh, I do have I have discs of the BBC. No, I don't have. Do I? I've got two. I've got discs. There's an American version, actually, an American radio version. I think I've got the discs to that. There you got the accent right. I'm not sure about the BBC radio version. Can't remember. I don't think I've got it in here. I don't know where it is now. No, it's not in here. It could be anywhere. I shove things all over the place. But yeah, I remember but I think it's an American production that I've got discs to. Which is also heavily abridged, of course, because, even in something like that, there's an awful lot to the actual books, particularly Fellowship of the Ring, that you can't really do in a production. It has to be said. Like, there's no way you could put Tom Bombadil in a film version. Ian Holm, did he? He voiced Frodo in the BBC one, did he? I don't think you can put Tom Bombadil in. I think he's too... You can't do it. For an audience, like if you're going to introduce someone to Lord of the Rings through a film, can you in all seriousness put Tom Bombadil in? I miss Tom, but you can't. People would just wonder what the hell they'd think a circus had broken out. He's a strange character, like really strange. He dances around. It's not even adequately explained what the bloody hell he is even in the books. Like, no, we don't even know where he fits in to the whole mythology. But he is whimsical is actually the word. Yes, that's a very good word. He is too for a film of that nature. He's at odds with it. It works in the book. You get away with it in the book, but you are not going to get away with it in a film. But the thing is, he's not like the Balrog, though, because we know what the Balrogs are. They're Maya. The big problem is that Tom says that he was there from the start. But none of the Valar or Maya were there at the start. They came later. I mean, Valar created it, of course. But they arrived later. But he says he was there from the start. So he doesn't fit anywhere. And it's never really explained what he is. He's like the ultimate mystery in it. I mean, again, it's like... And if you don't have Tom in it, you sort of understand how... Because imagine they went to the Barrow Downs, and there you've got Elijah Wood singing a song imploring Tom Bombadil to come and rescue him. Again. And then it all suddenly gets super... You've got this really dark moment with Frodo about to have a dagger plunged into him, all super dark and scary, and he starts singing a song about Tom Bombadil. You can't do it. It doesn't work. Intentionally left Tom explain. Unexplained. I'm not sure, unless he specifically said that, and even if he did, there's an awful lot of things, because it was one person doing all this stuff. I know his son's tried to make sense of it since, but I think with a lot of things, he just didn't have time. I mean, a lot of things changed anyway over time. Like he always said of the Nazgul, he doesn't know why they're afraid of water. He just knows that they are. He doesn't know why. But he has these things. And I think sometimes he did so much, there wasn't the time to keep revisiting it because he kept creating more mythology on top of it. But I'm not sure I would believe that he ever deliberately just left something completely. I can believe that he would have left something because it was not high priority to really work it through. He said it in a letter, did he? He wanted to have some things outside explanation. Well, okay. Didn't see that, but even then, I don't know, it seems a bit weird. Because he did used to go back to some things a long time after. And try and make sense of them or change them and things like that. You wonder what... You can't do a film about the Silmarillion either. The Silmarillion isn't even a story. It's not a novel. It's just... Yeah, the best way to approach the Silmarillion, there's no narrative running through it. It's a reference book. It's like reading a history of a... You know, if you go to the library and I want a history of Britain or a history of Canada or France or something like that, it's like it tells you what's happened but it's not a story. It's not a novel. So you'd have no chance with the Silmarillion, surely. No, even the elves don't know. Well, that's what I mean. He says he was there from the very beginning. In other words, Arda was created. He was there. That's the problem. That's the issue. What on earth was there from the start that was created as part of it? So we assume it was something created by Iluvatar, I guess. Had nothing to do with the Valar. But then the Valar created everything. It was just to Iluvatar's design. It's all weird. I don't know. But he wouldn't anyway. He doesn't need to. I mean, to be fair to him, I strongly suspect he didn't actually want to do a 3-film version of The Hobbit. You know, it was just studios saying, well, if you can make 3 films, we'll make 3 times as much money. So can you make 3, please? But usually people like that don't want to get bogged down in one thing. They want to do other projects after it, don't they? It would fit a television series better. You know, you could do a television series, which they're doing. I don't know anything about it, but there is a television series of Lord of the Rings coming out, isn't there? But I don't know anything about it. But it would suit. You could have a more faithful representation of the book in a series, I think, than you can in a film. You could make a mini series. You could have, like, if you did it like a history documentary of, like, as I say, different periods of a nation's history. If you were to do the same sort of format for the Silmarillion, dramatized, fine, that's no problem. A dramatized version of it. But if you approached it as if you were doing a history documentary or dramatization, that could work. But it just doesn't. There's no, as I say, there isn't a consistent narrative running through it. Which, of course, because it was never bloody written like that. You know, as I say, a lot of these books were just Christopher Tolkien trying to, you know, present his father's work after he died in the most complete form that he could, without contradicting a load of other stuff. Because there are I mean, there's some contradictions, or at least inconsistencies between, say, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, because certain things have changed even between the writing of those. Could he be Iluvatar? That might be a bit of an extreme suggestion. It wouldn't necessarily be impossible, because there's no... He's not described as having any limits on his power. Or he could be a projection of Iluvatar, maybe. I don't know. The Amazon series is not the book. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't have thought anything would be totally faithful to it anyway. Because I say there's certain things that I just don't think work in a dramatised form. Everything to do with the Old Forest and the Barrow Downs being chief amongst them. But I don't know anything about it other than it's a thing. So when it comes out, then I shall watch it and I'll see. I'm not necessarily interested in trying to find spoilers anyway. I'll just wait for it to be done and then watch it. And we'll see from there. And if it's no good, it's no good. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't... It's not like... See, something like this, you see, if someone makes a mess of it, it doesn't matter because it's not canon. They, you know, they can't change anything. They're just presenting a different version of it and you can just completely ignore it. You know, you have a bigger problem with, say, something like Disney doing the Star Wars films, because whatever they put out on screen is canon and that's it. That's all there is to it. You know, you can't change it. It's done. It's done. It's about Aragorn before the Fellowship. See, that was another thing in the film that they was unnecessarily wrong. The fact that in the film, Aragorn was unwilling to accept his destiny as King of Gondor. Whereas in the book, he was champing at the bit. He'd been waiting for years to be able to reforge Narsil and to actually go to Gondor. Been desperate to do it. He used to carry his broken bloody sword around with him. So it's all about Dunedain Rangers looking after Bree, is it? Is that what it is? How far back does it go? It doesn't, as I say, it doesn't matter. Find out when it's out. The new Star Wars movies aren't canon. They are, I'm afraid. We can't just say we might not like certain bits and therefore it's not canon. It is. You know, they own the rights to it. They have, see, what they've done is they've continued the story. It's a bit like in Doctor Who. When that American guy made that one episode of Doctor Who with Paul McGann. Now, I liked Paul McGann's Doctor, but I did not at all like the story. It was. I mean, it's what would happen if you got Americans to write Doctor Who. It's basically like, imagine, well, you don't have to imagine because it's been done. You know, if Americans wrote James Bond, what would you get? You'd get the Bourne identity. That's what it was. So it wasn't really. So you could almost imagine, if you'd have just done it with Paul McGann as the Doctor, you could say it was non-canon and forget about it. But he got Sylvester McCoy in there to regenerate into Paul McGann, and therefore it's canon. That's it. And it's the same with the Star Wars films. It is canon, whether you like it or not. Was the EU launch shit show the NA was? It depends which realm you were on. It wasn't. It was very bad for one particular realm. There were some issues for some other players as well, but by and large, I don't know that it was. I don't think it was terrible for most. I think it was all right for most. I have no idea how to explain how anyone acts in the latest Star Wars film. All I'm saying is that it's canon because it directly continues. The episode number is a direct continuation. The characters are a direct continuation. They refer to past events. It's all part of the same storyline. There's no alternate universe about it. It's a thing. Paul McGann, yes, the with now an I actor. So yeah, as I say, if they hadn't had Sylvester McCoy regenerating into him, they could have just pretended that it was separate, but no. Yeah, I mean, as far as I could tell, some people had a few teething issues on EU, but I don't. As I say, unless you're on the Draenor realm, which is a big realm, it wasn't dreadful. It was mostly okay. Yeah, I think someone said something about Illidan before. So, I mean, I think the key thing is, what is it like now? As long as it's sort of okay now, then they'll get away with it because, you know, it's one of those things. A launch is always a tricky thing, especially if it's for a very popular game. Yeah, you can sort of understand it if it's bad for a day, but after that, hopefully it should be okay. Star Wars is a story that should have been contained in 3 movies. Yes. Arguably, yes, they should have just kept it as those 3. But it was a massive money spinner. That never happens. Films make money. They don't stop till they stop making money. That's all there is to it. You know, that's how it has to work. Studios don't make films because they have a love of cinema. They make films because they want to make money. I mean, obviously some of the people that work on those films have a love of cinema, but ultimately the people who are driving it all are doing it for money. I'm not really a Star Trek fan. No, I've never really got into it. I watched it when I was a kid. I always had a problem with a few things. I have heard about the new Picard series, and I think it's a dreadful idea. Doesn't matter whether you liked The Next Generation or not, which I didn't. But it doesn't matter whether you did or not. What it says, when you do something like that, it says, we can't come up with any original ideas to continue the franchise. So we're just going to dig up an old fossil. Not that I'm calling Patrick Stewart an old fossil, but, you know, in terms of the concept of it all. But I always had an issue with Star Trek in that you have this ship, which is a military ship, the flagship of the fleet, in space. But if it wants to shoot something, it has to point at it. It has one gun facing in one direction. Now, even a battleship in real life has guns all around it. So that I could never get hold of. And then we also have the situation where all of the most important people on that ship, the commanders of it, were all in the most vulnerable part of the ship as well. The part which in The Next Generation, the first film they did, that shit as well, whatever that was called, which had Shatner and Stewart on the same thing. It crashes on a planet. Riker looks up and the bloody dome has cracked. This is the bridge. This is the most important people on the ship. And an impact shatters the dome. It is true of The Next Generation as well. It is absolutely true. I've seen it in The Next Generation as well. Useless. But it doesn't really matter because I watched very little of The Next Generation because I watched the first few bits and I just thought the acting was so god-awful. Like, the reason why people like Jean-Luc Picard, I am convinced, is because he was the only character that was played by an actor. Everyone else... Brent Spiner gets a pass for Data because that character is supposed to be wooden. Everyone else was useless. They were all shit. Who's my all-time favourite baddie? On what? I can't answer you on Star Trek. I hadn't watched enough of them. And I can't remember enough from the original series because I watched all those when I was a kid. I never watched them as an adult. I wasn't that bothered. I even tried watching the occasional episode every now, whenever a new series came out. It was just awful. The actors were dreadful. They were just talking properly. They used to stand there with their arms as if they were sellotaped to their side and just say their words and then piss off out of shot while someone else came in to say. They were talking props. Never has the phrase been more accurately used. They had... Now, I did watch a bit of Voyager. Voyager was more... No, not Voyager. Shit, not that shit. Deep Space Nine. That was more watchable. Because there you did actually at least have some actors and it was a bit more interesting. Even though there were a couple of episodes where they ripped off a Doctor Who story, but never mind that. That was more watchable, but even that I wasn't a big fan of. That's how people of the future speak. What, just stood with their arms nailed to their side in a monotone. The Enterprise was exploration. It was described as the flagship of the fleet. So it's a military vessel, supposedly capable of... Well, it was capable of combat. It got involved in combat. You had a chief engineer who was always panicking as well. Always telling the captain, sorry, oh, you want the ship to move faster? Oh, sorry, can't do that. I don't know. So no, I didn't get on with it. No. Even as a kid, I just thought to myself, what the hell is this? Can you add a link in chat now? You can tell me what it is and privately link it to me, and then I might put it in if it looks all right. But actually, I don't know. Actually, it's YouTube. I have no idea on YouTube what the rules are. You might be able to. I haven't got a clue. Actually, that's the one thing you can't do on YouTube anymore, privately link. I think they've removed the feature now. And which series was this in? Because if this came in 5 years into it, after people had to point it out repeatedly, and they did it once, that doesn't really count. Because I remember the very last episode even of the Next Generation, where it's the same thing. Riker, who's an admiral by then for some god-awful reason, he comes in, he has to fire through the front. And this is supposed to be in the future compared to Next Generation. So I'm not sure I believe it. Maybe someone just got a still from Next Generation and put some graphics on it. But you can try. You can try and link it. I don't know if it will work. It may work. In terms of American sci-fi, I did like Babylon 5. It had god-awful... Obviously, the CGI was super dodgy. They might as well have just done cartoons for the space scenes. But the series was good. Movies to books. I Am Legend. I've never read I Am Legend or seen, actually, so I really don't know about that one. But film adaptations they are generally not very faithful to the books. I had a friend who was furious when he saw Watership Down because he'd read the book before he saw the film. He was furious, not at all happy with it. I thought Watership Down was a nice film. Look up Brent Spiner and Night Court for a character he played prior. Why, are you saying he did a good job or not a good job? Like, as I say, I make no comment about him because the character he was playing was supposed to be wooden and emotionless. So he's all right. He may have been fine. Battlestar Galactica. I didn't watch the more modern version. I only watched the version that I grew up with in the 80s. I don't know. Eventually I may get around to doing that. I always have like things on the go when I've got some time to do some reading before bed. At the moment I'm reading Warhammer books. They're trying to catch up on the lore that I've missed out over a decade. Except I can't really get into any of the stories that involve the Stormcast Eternals. Because I just keep reading it and thinking, these are Space Marines. I can't get it out of my head that they're basically Space Marines that can come back to life. Well, most books are short. He did a very good job. Well, that's fine. I'm perfectly happy to accept that he's a reasonable actor, but the rest of them were useless. The guy who played Riker, I mean, he had to grow up. He was that uninteresting as an actor. He had to grow a beard just to have a talking point. You know, the one who played that counselor, she was useless as well. They might as well have just you know, instead of paying all that money for these actors, which it must have been a lot, because I know Michael Dorn, who played Worf, he used to, as a hobby, like, he had a jet plane or something, didn't he? So they must have been raking it in. And they could have just bought a jelly from the local shops and put that in a seat, and it would have done just as well. Is the Kulturan accent based off your... Well, not Not specifically my accent, I don't think. It's based on a British accent. The guy who played Q, yeah, the guy who played Q was all right, but again, he wasn't right regular. You should get, you know, your regulars should be decent actors. Counselor was a porn star. It's irrelevant what they were elsewhere, but if you're going to get someone to play a main character, they should be able to do more than just memorize lines. Even I could memorize lines. I'm not an actor. I need to watch some Battlestar Galactica. No, you need to stop telling me to do things that already take up time I don't have. I already don't have enough time. When I'm old and knackered and can't do anything else, maybe I'll spend my days just watching old DVDs of noughties sci-fi. Yes, I think it's sort of based more southern. I mean, the Gilneans are supposed to be like a bit like Cockney, proper like London Cockney, aren't they? Whereas, I don't know exactly where Culturan's supposed to be based. But you can sort of tell it's based on an English-ish accent. It's proper stereotypes though, isn't it, the Gilnean stuff? You know, I half expect when I click on an NPC for them to say, "Gore blimey, stone the crows, governor." Hang on, which one are we talking about now? Oh, Battlestar Galactica, maybe. I don't mind technobabble as long as it's fine, as long as it's written by someone who has an understanding of science and doesn't just... Like, this was the problem I had. See, a lot of... I'm not saying a lot of the old Doctor Who's were all perfect, but a lot of them were, because a lot of them were written by people who were actually scientists. They weren't just knowledgeable about science, they were actually scientists. The person who created the Cybermen was a doctor who was into cybernetics, you know, so there were people who actually understood stuff. Whereas with the modern Doctor Who, he's basically a wizard. You know, he comes up to a problem, he waves his magic wand, his sonic screwdriver at it and fixes it. I don't like that. He's basically now a wizard. No, I don't think they would try and do any Geordie in it. Well, maybe a dialect, but I don't think they would actually try and, you know, have any sort of the terms used. In fact, I gather, I don't know whether it's true or not, I gather that when the Full Monty, because that came out when I started my teaching career, and I gather in America, there were little guides produced to explain some of the terms used for people. And that's quite tame. That's just South York. That's where I'm from, South Yorkshire, you know. Whereas Geordie is a combination. It's a mixture of English and Danish, because they were the ones who were properly taken over by the Vikings, and they hung around as well, even after Alfred the Great's time. Oh, you see, when I played Dungeons and Dragons, I never bothered trying to put on an accent. I tried it a couple of times and I was awful at it, so I thought, I'm not going to bother. I'm not going to try and play a character. I'll just play me in this setting. Or you know, whatever. Yes, Finns are European. What do you think they are? I mean, even the western parts of Russia considers itself European. Not like politically European, but... Well, it likes to enter the Eurovision Song Contest. Well, obviously Genghis Khan did come fairly far west, but it's still part of Europe. Well, you know, ancestry-wise, are all there's only like 6 variations anyway. Well, some will and some won't. You know, there would have been a certain amount of intermingling going on. From Derry, they did the same thing with Derry Girls on Channel 4. Had guides in newspapers to help understand, right? Oh dear, it's always a bit sad when you can't. Because the thing is, you see, if you just watch these things, you soon pick it up anyway, because you just see it in context. That's how you learn anything. That's how you learn your own dialect in the first place. You just listen to other people talking, and you soon work out what it is. You know, I mean, my mum and dad never sat me down one day and said, right, we're going to teach you all this Yorkshire slang. You just pick it up. It's the same thing when I was growing up and used to watch Rabsy Nesbitt. You eventually just work out what's... Even though the guy who played him was, you know, very much from the south of England. But the other characters in it were Glaswegian, I think. The Sacha Baron Cohen movie. I haven't seen it. I'm not a huge fan of his stuff, actually. Like, some of it... his normal stuff where he basically pranks people. I'm not into practical jokes like that. Even when the people who are victims of it might deserve it. I'm not really a fan of that sort of behaviour. But in terms of films, some of them, it's hit and miss for me. I don't like the Borat stuff. I thought The Dictator was funny most of the time, but not all the way through. I thought some of it was a bit shit. But I've never seen like the Grimsby thing. Am I 120 on live? No, I'm 117. That's when I'll leave it until like tomorrow morning. Or, well, it depends. Like, if I can't get to sleep tonight, then I might, you know, carry on for a bit later. But I want to do some painting first of all. I tried to undercoat some models. That didn't go terribly well. Because although the weather is now better from my point of view, because it's cooler, the atmosphere outside is not really suitable for spray painting. So I might have to do some touching up before I can start. Gregor Fish, but his normal accent is very... He's not Scottish, though. Is he actually Scottish? You're having me on, aren't you? Because when I've heard him do interviews, he does not sound Scottish. Oh, well, Wikipedia says he is. Would you believe it? Really? That's amazing, because he doesn't sound it when you hear him speak normally. Wow. Okay. What the hell? Whereabouts is he from, then? Clackmannanshire. Don't even... Oh, brought up in Edinburgh. Right, blimey. It's not even like he moved to England, then, is it? How the hell does he sound as he does? Or maybe he's putting on English accents in interviews just to confuse me. Well, it all sounds a bit Southern England. I wouldn't say posh as such, but it doesn't sound northern at all. Just trying to have a look here. Oh, I don't know. Billy Connolly never did he? People just had to get used to him. Oh, well, there we go. Right, well, we'll sort of call it there because you lot have got to go and do some levelling. I've got to go and do some painting. Edinburgh, well, compared to Glasgow, Edinburgh would be pretty posh, yes. I will grant you that. In fact, it's amazing to me, even though I'm constantly trying to explain in videos to people from outside of Britain, just how you don't have to go very far at all before a dialect, an accent is very, very different. But given that Glasgow and Edinburgh are both sort of on the quite far south, they're not, I mean, they're not next to each other, but they're not miles away. The difference between the Glaswegian and Edinburgh accent is huge. You're fishing in Stormsong Valley. I've picked up paint, well, no, Warhammer model painting, but I need to get some done. Like, at this point in my original plan, I should have already had my first game of Age of Sigmar 2 weeks ago, probably. I should now have been building up my 2,000 point army and should be having regular games down at the local gaming club. None of this has happened. Is it only 20 miles apart? Well, I don't even know my geography anymore. Gordon, Benny, I don't know anything. You're exposing my ignorance tonight. Let's have a look. I mean, I know they're not, as I say, miles apart. I didn't think they were that close there. They don't look, they look more than 20, they're more than 20 miles apart there, surely. Let's see what Google Maps has to say on the subject. Centre to centre, at any rate. It doesn't actually tell me. It just tells me how long it'll take. That's no good. Oh no. Well, I suppose it depends where the boundaries are. Centre to centre would be 47 miles. But yeah, it's not a mass. Yeah, an hour's drive is not like the longest distance. But then again, I suppose you can argue that by some countries' standards, getting from anywhere to anywhere in Britain isn't that. I mean, I suppose if you went from Land's End to John O'Groats, that would take a while. But most players, especially by like American standards, are not like huge distances. I was listening to an American travel vlogger describing how every couple of weeks he goes and sees his mum just for lunch. And it's a 3-hour drive. So it's a 3-hour drive there, has lunch with his mum, and a 3-hour drive back. Every fortnight. I don't think I would be doing that. Talking hours, not miles. Yes. But yeah, it is. It's amazing how different they are anyway. But anyway, I'm going to call it an end there. So thanks for coming on, everyone. Have I ever been to a time? I've hardly been to Scotland at all. This last little thing. I've hardly ever been. I've been to the Fringe, the Fringe Festival once. And that was in Edinburgh. Where I learnt, see, before I went to Edinburgh, there was me thinking Sheffield was quite hilly. Because I remember I used to go to Sheffield a bit because I live near there. But there was one particular time when I went there for an event and I decided during the lunch break to go to McDonald's or something like that. And I looked at the map and thought, it's only that far, it's easy. Failing to take into account there's a lot of up and downy in Sheffield. Nothing on... Edinburgh's basically a hill. The whole thing is basically a hill. It's a nightmare. Couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. It's worse than Lincoln even. And that's quite similar. It's extreme. But anyway, yeah, so I shall call it an end there, finally. Thanks for coming on. I'll be streaming tomorrow. I think by the time I will be streaming, I should be 120. So it's likely to be world quests and trying to actually get into some dungeons. Hoping I can actually get into some dungeons. That would be nice. But anyway, have a good night, everyone. And I will see you tomorrow when I expect all of you to be 120 as well. So good night.